The summer of 1884 had been merciless to Dustwood. The earth cracked like broken promises, and the desert wind carried sand that stung the eyes and scraped the throat. It was the kind of heat that made men mean and women silent, the kind that turned the smallest disagreement into gunfire. Joanna Cross stood at the kitchen window of the sheriff's house, watching dust devils dance across Main Street. Her hands, delicate despite years of frontier life, gripped a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The town below seemed to shimmer in the heat, the church with its weather-beaten cross, the saloon where piano music drifted out even at noon, and the old jailhouse where her husband kept order with an iron fist. "You'll wear a hole in that floor if you keep pacing." Martha, the housekeeper, said from behind her. Joanna hadn't realized she'd been moving. "Just restless, I suppose. This heat." Martha nodded knowingly. At 60, she'd seen enough frontier wives to recognize the signs. "Why don't you go help at the church tent? Doc Morrison could use extra hands with the sick." It was a reasonable suggestion. As the sheriff's wife, Joanna was expected to be charitable, visible, respectable. She'd played the role for 5 years now, ever since Ethan Cross had courted her with his badge shining and promises of stability. The town respected her, or at least respected what she represented: law, order, and proper Christian marriage. She changed into her plainest dress, pinned her auburn hair beneath a simple bonnet, and walked the dusty path to the church. The temporary medical tent stood beside it, canvas walls offering little relief from the heat. Inside, Doc Morrison tended to a miner with a festering wound. "Mrs. Cross," he greeted her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Good of you to come. Could you fetch some water from the well? And check the old barn for any spare blankets. We're running low." The abandoned barn sat at the edge of church property, half collapsed and forgotten. Joanna picked her way through the tall grass, her skirts catching on thorns. The door hung crooked on its hinges, creaking as she pushed it open. The smell hit her first, blood and sweat and something wild. Then she saw him. A man lay in the hay, his shirt dark with dried blood. His face was turned away, but something about the way he held himself, even in pain, made her heart skip. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, time seemed to fold in on itself. "Caleb," she breathed. Caleb Vane's eyes, still that impossible shade of blue despite the pain clouding them, met hers. 5 years had carved new lines into his face, turned his sandy hair darker, but she would have known him anywhere. "Hello, Joanna." His voice was rougher now, edged with something hard. Or should I say Mrs. Cross? She should run. She should scream. She should do anything but step closer. But her feet moved of their own accord. "You can't be here. They'll hang you if they find you. They'll have to catch me first." He tried to sit up and grimaced, fresh blood seeping through his shirt. "Though I admit I'm not in the best shape for running." "What happened?" "Bounty hunter got lucky. I got luckier." His laugh was bitter. "Depends on how you look at it, I suppose." Joanna knelt beside him, her hands already reaching for his wound before her mind could stop them. The bullet had gone through his side, painful but not fatal if kept clean. She'd learned enough from Doc Morrison to know that much. "I should get my husband," she said, even as she began tearing strips from her petticoat. "You should." Caleb's hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "But you won't." She yanked free, pressing the cloth against his wound harder than necessary. He hissed in pain. "You don't know me anymore. Caleb Vane. I'm not the girl you left behind." "No," he agreed, studying her face. "You're sadder." The words hit her like a physical blow. She focused on his wound, cleaning it with water from her canteen, trying not to think about how familiar his skin felt beneath her fingers. "Why did you come back?" she asked finally. "You know why. Joseph will never admit to what he did. And even if he did, who would believe you over a man of God?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "He took everything from me. My land, my name, my—" He stopped, looking away. "I was innocent. Joanna, you know I was." She did know. had known it even as she'd stood in the courthouse 5 years ago, watching them drag him away in chains. Joseph Harrow, the town's beloved minister, had sworn on the Bible that he'd seen Caleb stealing cattle, had produced evidence that seemed irrefutable. But Joanna had seen the way Joseph looked at the Vane property, prime land with water rights worth killing for. Knowing and proving are different things, she said softly. And even if you could prove it, killing him won't bring back what you lost. Won't it? His eyes burned into hers. Justice denied is justice stolen. Your husband taught me that, right before he locked me up. She finished bandaging his wound in silence, her mind racing. She should leave. Every second she stayed increased the risk, but something kept her there, kneeling in the dusty hay beside the only man she'd ever truly loved. There's food in my saddlebags, Caleb said, gesturing to the corner where his gear lay hidden. And medicine. I came prepared to hole up for a while. You're planning something. It wasn't a question. Sunday service, he said simply. The whole town will be there. Joseph will stand at his pulpit, preaching about righteousness and truth, and I'll give them both. Caleb, no. There has to be another way. What way? His voice rose, then dropped again as pain lanced through him. I tried the law. I tried appeals. I even tried hiring a lawyer from Denver. Joseph has this town wrapped around his holy finger. The only justice left is the kind that comes from a gun. Joanna stood abruptly, brushing hay from her skirts. I won't be part of this. I'm not asking you to be. He caught her hand as she turned to go. Joanna, I never meant for you to be caught in the middle. If I could have stayed away, but you couldn't. She pulled free, not trusting herself to look back. You never could leave well enough alone. Caleb Vane. She fled the barn, her heart pounding. The sun had dropped lower, casting long shadows across the church grounds. Doc Morrison barely looked up when she returned, murmuring something about not finding any blankets. She helped tend the sick until twilight, her movements mechanical, her thoughts far away. The walk home felt endless. Every person she passed seemed to look at her strangely, as if they could see her secret written on her face. By the time she reached the sheriff's house, her nerves were worn raw. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, cleaning his rifle. He was a big man, solid and dependable as granite, with prematurely gray hair that made him look older than his 35 years. When he looked up at her, his brown eyes were unreadable. You're late, he said. The medical tent was busy, that fever's spreading through the mining camp. She busied herself with preparing dinner, grateful for something to do with her hands. Morrison's lucky to have you. He set the rifle aside, watching her move about the kitchen. You've got a gentle touch. The town notices such things. Was there an edge to his voice? Or was it her guilty conscience? Joanna forced herself to meet his eyes. I do what I can. As you should. A sheriff's wife has responsibilities. He stood, crossing to her. His hand was heavy on her shoulder. Just as a sheriff has responsibilities to protect what's his. She went very still. Has something happened? Maybe. Got word of a stranger asking questions in Silver Creek. Matches the description of someone we'd all rather stayed gone. His fingers tightened slightly. You haven't seen anything unusual today, have you? No. The lie came too quickly, too easily. Nothing at all. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. If Caleb Vane is fool enough to show his face around here, he'll find a noose waiting. Man should know when he's beaten. He kissed her forehead, a dry, dutiful gesture, and went to wash for dinner. Joanna gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. Through the window, she could see the old barn in the distance, a dark shape against the dying light. That night, she lay beside her husband, listening to his steady breathing. The room was stiflingly hot, but she didn't dare move, afraid any restlessness would wake him. Her mind kept returning to the barn, to blue eyes that had once promised her everything. She'd been 17 when she'd first met Caleb, barely more than a child. He'd been 20, working his family's wheat fields with dreams of expanding. She'd loved him with the fierce certainty of youth, the kind of love that felt like drowning and flying all at once. They'd planned a life together, a small house by the creek, children who would grow up free under the wide sky. Then Joseph Harrow had come to town with his honeyed words and hidden appetites, and everything had changed. Ethan stirred beside her, mumbling something in his sleep. She forced herself to relax, to breathe normally. She was Mrs. Ethan Cross now, respectable and safe. The past was buried, and it needed to stay that way. But as dawn crept through the curtains, Joanna knew with cold certainty that the past had come home to Dustwood. And this time, it would not leave quietly. Sunday morning dawned clear and merciless, the kind of day that made the church bells sound like a death knell. Joanna dressed carefully in her best blue dress, the one Ethan insisted made her look like a proper sheriff's wife. Her fingers trembled as she pinned up her hair. "You're fidgeting," Ethan observed from the doorway. He was already dressed in his Sunday suit, the silver star pinned prominently to his vest. "The heat," she murmured. "It makes everyone restless." He crossed to her, straightening her collar with practiced hands. "Joseph's preparing a special sermon today, something about the wages of sin and the price of redemption. Should be powerful." Joanna's stomach churned. He always did have a way with words. That he does. Man could talk the devil into attending church. Ethan's laugh was dry. "Speaking of which, I've posted extra men around town. Can't be too careful with Vane possibly in the area." "Do you really think he'd come here? To Dustwood?" "A man nursing a grudge for 5 years might do anything, but don't worry yourself." He patted her cheek, a gesture more possessive than tender. "I'll keep you safe." The walk to church felt like a funeral procession. The entire town had turned out, families in their Sunday best despite the heat. Joanna nodded and smiled at the greetings, playing her part perfectly, even as her heart raced. The church stood proud against the harsh landscape, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the sun. Inside, the pews were already filling. Joanna took her usual place in the front row, Ethan beside her, his hand resting on his gun even in God's house. Joseph Harrow stood at the pulpit, resplendent in his black robes. At 45, he was still handsome in that way that made women trust him and men respect him. His salt and pepper beard was perfectly trimmed, his voice rich and commanding as he greeted his flock. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his arms spread wide, "we gather today in celebration of truth, of justice, of the righteous path that—" The church doors slammed open. Caleb Vane stood silhouetted against the blazing sun, his duster coat pushed back to reveal the Colt at his hip. The congregation gasped, some women crying out. Ethan was on his feet instantly, hand on his weapon. "Nobody move," Caleb said, his voice carrying clear and cold through the church. He walked down the aisle with measured steps, spurs ringing against the floorboards. "I'm here for the good minister. The rest of you just sit tight. Caleb Vane." Joseph's voice wavered only slightly. "You dare defile God's house with your presence?" "Funny thing about God's house," Caleb replied, never taking his eyes off the minister. "I always heard it was supposed to be built on truth." "But you wouldn't know much about that, would you?" "Joseph?" Ethan stepped into the aisle. "That's far enough. Vane, you're under arrest." "Am I?" Caleb's hand hovered near his gun. "For what crime? Sheriff? Walking into a church? Last I checked, even condemned men were welcome in God's house. For escaping lawful custody? For being innocent?" Caleb's voice rose. "For having my land stolen by a lying snake in priest's clothing?" The congregation stirred uneasily. Joanna gripped the pew until her knuckles went white, her eyes fixed on Caleb. He looked different in the light, gaunt, determined, dangerous. "You were tried and convicted," Joseph said, regaining some composure. "A jury of 12 good men. 12 men who owed you money or favors." Caleb took another step forward. 12 men who believed your lies because they came wrapped in scripture." "Blasphemy," someone whispered. "Is it?" Caleb's laugh was bitter. "Tell them, Joseph. Tell them about the water rights on my land. Tell them how you needed that water for your investment with the mining company. Tell them how convenient it was that I got arrested just days before the deal went through. The ravings of a desperate criminal, Joseph said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. Ethan moved to draw his weapon, but Caleb was faster. The Colt appeared in his hand like magic, trained not on Ethan, but on Joseph. I said, "Nobody move." His voice was deadly calm. "This is between me and the minister. Caleb, please." The words escaped Joanna before she could stop them. Every eye in the church turned to her. "This isn't the way." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret, but his gun never wavered. "There is no other way. Joanna, you know that better than anyone." The weight of his words, the intimacy in his voice, sent whispers rippling through the congregation. Ethan's face darkened, his gaze moving between his wife and the outlaw. "You want to confess, Joseph?" Caleb asked. "Here's your chance. Tell them the truth, and I'll let you live." Joseph drew himself up, clutching his Bible. "I have nothing to confess to you, murderer." "Murderer?" Caleb's voice dropped dangerously. "The only thing I ever killed was the trust I had in justice. But you," he cocked the hammer, "you killed something a lot more precious than that." "Caleb, no!" Joanna was on her feet, but Ethan grabbed her arm, holding her back. "Sit down," he hissed. "Don't make this worse." Joseph raised his Bible like a shield. "You would spill blood in God's house. You would damn your soul forever. My soul was damned the day you put your hands on her." The words hung in the air like a noose. Joanna felt the blood drain from her face as understanding dawned on some faces, confusion on others. Joseph's mask finally slipped, real fear flashing in his eyes. "I don't know what lies this man has told you," he began. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Joseph staggered back, red blooming across his white shirt. The Bible fell from his hands, pages fluttering like dying birds. He reached out, grasping for the pulpit, then crumpled to the floor. Screams erupted. Women grabbed their children, men shouted, and Ethan shoved Joanna aside as he drew his weapon. But Caleb had already turned, walking back down the aisle with that same measured pace. "Anyone follows me, they'll get the same," he said without looking back. "Man had it coming, and you all know it. Some of you even know why." He paused at the door, his eyes finding Joanna's across the chaos. Something passed between them, understanding, sorrow, a promise unspoken. Then he was gone, leaving only gun smoke and shattered sanctity behind. Ethan rushed to Joseph, but it was too late. The minister's eyes stared sightlessly at the rafters, blood pooling beneath him in horrible parody of communion wine. Doc Morrison pushed through the crowd, but after a brief examination, he shook his head. "He's gone," he announced unnecessarily. The church erupted. Some women fainted, others wept. Men shouted for justice, for passes, for revenge. Through it all, Joanna stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the fallen minister. She felt nothing, no grief, no shock, only a terrible sense of inevitability. "Lock down the town," Ethan barked, taking charge. "Nobody leaves until we've searched every building. Get riders to the neighboring towns. I want roadblocks on every trail out of here." His men scattered to follow orders. Only then did he turn to Joanna, his face a mask of controlled fury. "We're going home," he said quietly. "Now." She followed him wordlessly through the milling crowd. People stared, whispered, pointed. She heard fragments. The way he looked at her, called her by name. What did he mean about hands on her? But it all seemed distant, unreal. The sheriff's house had never felt more like a prison. Ethan slammed the door behind them, rounded on her immediately. "You knew he was here." It wasn't a question. Joanna lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. "I didn't know he would do this. But you knew he was here." His voice was dangerously quiet. "When? Where?" She considered lying, but what was the point now? "Yesterday, in the old barn, he was wounded." Ethan's face went very still. "And you didn't tell me. He was hurt. I couldn't just what? Be loyal to your husband? Uphold the law?" He slammed his fist on the table, making her jump. Do you have any idea what you've done? I showed mercy to a wounded man. You harbored a fugitive, a murderer. He wasn't a murderer yesterday, she shot back, surprising them both with her vehemence. Ethan stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. My God, you still love him. The words hung between them like a blade. Joanna wanted to deny it, knew she should, but the lie wouldn't come. Her silence was answer enough. 5 years, Ethan said wonderingly. 5 years of marriage, and you've been pining for him the whole time. I've been a good wife to you. Have you? He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. Tell me, Joanna, when I held you at night, were you thinking of him? He stopped, his jaw clenched. What did he mean? About Joseph putting hands on someone? Joanna's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. She sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. It doesn't matter now. The hell it doesn't. A man is dead, shot down in church because of something. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by revulsion. He meant you. She couldn't look at him. It was a long time ago. When? Does it matter? When? Before we married, and after. The words came out in a whisper. The silence stretched unbearably. When she finally looked up, Ethan's face had gone pale. Joseph, he said slowly, our minister, the man who married us, who baptized half this town. He forced himself on you? He called it counseling, said I needed to be cleansed of my sinful thoughts about Caleb. Her laugh was bitter. And you never wondered why I stopped going to private prayer meetings. You should have told me. Would you have believed me? The word of a woman against God's chosen servant? She stood, anger finally breaking through. You worship that man. The whole town does. Did. Ethan sank into the opposite chair, looking suddenly old. I should have protected you. You should have seen. The accusation hung sharp between them. But you saw what you wanted to see. The perfect wife, the perfect minister, the perfect town. And anyone who threatened that picture had to be removed. Caleb was guilty. The evidence was planted, and you know it. Deep down, you've always known it. She leaned forward, forcing him to meet her eyes. Just like deep down, you knew something was wrong with Joseph, but it was easier to look away, wasn't it? Easier to keep the peace. Ethan's face flushed. I've spent my life upholding the law in this town. Whose law? Joseph's. He wrote it to suit himself, and you enforced it. She stood, suddenly needing distance. I need air. You're not leaving this house. What are you going to do? Ethan, arrest me? She laughed, high and slightly wild. Your wife, the accomplice to murder? Won't that look fine in the papers? Joanna, I'm going to my room. We can discuss what remains of our marriage when you've caught him. She paused at the stairs. If you catch him. She climbed to their bedroom, her bedroom now, she supposed, and closed the door. Through the window, she could see men gathering in the street, checking weapons, saddling horses. The hunt was beginning. Somewhere out there, Caleb was running, but he'd be back. She knew it with the same certainty she knew the sun would rise. He'd tasted blood, but not satisfaction. Joseph was dead. But the truth remained buried. And Joanna, trapped between the law and the outlaw, between duty and desire, could only wait for the reckoning she knew must come. The mountains held secrets in their shadowed valleys and hidden caves. Caleb knew them all, had learned them as a boy hunting with his father, had memorized them during his years as a fugitive. Now they sheltered him again as he picked his way through narrow passes, the posse's shouts echoing far below. 3 days had passed since the shooting. 3 days of cat and mouse through the brutal terrain, living on strips of dried beef and water from hidden springs. His wound had reopened during the hard riding, and fever came and went like an unwelcome companion. He sheltered that night in a cave halfway up Widow's Peak, building a small fire far enough back that its light wouldn't show. The smoke would dissipate through cracks in the rock above. An old Apache trick he'd learned from a cellmate during his brief imprisonment. As he tended his wound, he thought of Joanna. The look on her face in the church haunted him. Horror mixed with something else. Something that gave him hope he had no right to feel. She'd tried to stop him, even after everything. She'd tried to save Joseph's worthless life, but she'd also hidden him, tended his wound, kept his secret. That had to mean something. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Outside, coyotes howled at the crescent moon. Caleb closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of weakness, a moment to remember. Her hair spread across the hay like spilled copper, her laugh bright as spring water. "Promise me," she'd said, 17 and fearless. "Promise you'll always come back to me. Always," he'd sworn, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of forever. The memory cut deep. He'd broken that promise, failed her in every way that mattered, while he'd rotted in prison, then fled like a coward. She'd been here, trapped, suffering. A pebble clattered outside the cave. Caleb's hand found his gun instantly, every sense alert. The footsteps were too light for a man, too deliberate for an animal. He pressed back into the shadows, weapon raised. "Don't shoot, it's me!" Joanna stepped into the firelight like a vision, wrapped in a dark cloak, carrying a cloth bundle. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Caleb lowered his gun with a shaking hand. "How did you find me?" "I remember all your hiding places." She set down the bundle. "Food, medical supplies, ammunition. You showed them to me, remember? When we used to dream about running away together. Joanna, you can't be here. If Ethan is leading the posse toward Silver Creek. Someone reported seeing you there." She moved closer to the fire, pushing back her hood. "We have time. You shouldn't have come. You're burning with fever, your wound is festering, and you're down to your last bullets." She knelt beside him, already reaching for the medical supplies. "Would you prefer I let you die?" "Maybe that would be better for everyone." She slapped him. Not hard, but enough to shock them both. Don't you dare give up now. After everything." He caught her hand before she could pull away. "Joe, no." She yanked free, busying herself with preparing bandages. "You don't get to disappear for 5 years, come back and shoot a man in my husband's church, then talk about dying. You don't get to leave me again." The pain in her voice undid him. "I'm sorry. God, Joe, I'm so sorry. When they took me away, when I realized what Joseph had done, I should have found a way, should have protected you. I was 17. Caleb, a girl. What was I supposed to do when the minister himself said he'd witnessed your crime? When the whole town turned against you?" Tears ran down her face as she cleaned his wound with a gentle efficiency. "And then Ethan started courting me, and everyone said how lucky I was, how safe I'd be as the sheriff's wife. You did what you had to do." "Did I?" She laughed bitterly. "I married a man I didn't love to escape a man I feared. And Ethan, he's not cruel, but he's not kind either. He sees what he wants to see, believes what's convenient to believe. Does he hurt you?" "Not with his fists." She tied off the bandage, sitting back. "There are other ways to hurt a woman. Indifference, control, making her feel like she's losing her mind for wanting something more than duty and propriety." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, rain began to fall. Gentle at first, then harder, washing away tracks and scent trails, a gift from heaven, or perhaps hell. Caleb couldn't decide which. "I brought something else," Joanna said finally. From her cloak, she produced a leather journal, water-stained and worn. "I found it in Joseph's study, his private writings." Caleb took it with trembling hands. Even in the dim light, he could make out dates, entries, confessions never meant for other eyes. His own name appeared frequently, along with details about the frame, the forged evidence, the witnesses paid to lie. "This could clear my name," he breathed, "or get us both hanged." Joanna moved closer, drawn by the heat of the fire or something else. "Ethan won't want to believe it. Neither will the town. Joseph was their spiritual guide, their moral compass. Admitting he was corrupt means admitting they were all fools. Then what do I do? I don't know. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something electric passed between them. All I know is I can't watch you die, not again. The rain intensified, drumming on the rocks outside. The cave felt smaller suddenly, intimate. Caleb became acutely aware of every detail, the way firelight caught in her hair, the rise and fall of her breath, the mere inches separating them. You should go, he said roughly. Before what? She leaned closer, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Before I remember what it felt like to be alive, before I forget I'm the respectable sheriff's wife. Joe, I've been dead for 5 years. Caleb, walking, talking, breathing, but dead inside. And then you came back. Her hand found his face, traced the new scars there. Why did you come back? You know why. Say it. Because I couldn't stay away. Because every mile I put between us felt like dying. Because... His control shattered. Because I love you. God help me. I never stopped. She kissed him then, and it was like coming home after years in the wilderness. The kiss tasted of tears and rain and desperate need. 5 years of loneliness, of pretending, of slowly suffocating in a life she hadn't chosen. All of it poured into that moment. Caleb pulled her against him, ignoring the pain in his side. She was real, solid, warm. Not the phantom that had haunted his dreams, but flesh and blood and fierce desire. Her hands tangled in his hair, holding him as if he might vanish. I can't, he gasped, pulling back. You're married. I won't make you an adulteress. You won't be, she said quietly. Joseph already did that. The words hung between them like a knife. Caleb went very still. What? How do you think I convinced him to stop? Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. After the 3rd time, I told him I'd confess to Ethan. Joseph laughed, said Ethan knew and didn't care, as long as it was kept quiet. Said it was the price of being the sheriff's wife, keeping the town's spiritual leader, satisfied. Red rage hazed Caleb's vision. I'll kill him again. I'll kill them both. No. She caught his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her. No more killing. Please, I've lost you to violence once. I won't survive it again. The fight went out of him. He pulled her close, gentler now, cradling her against his chest. What do you want, Joe? Tell me what you want, and I'll find a way to give it to you. I want to forget, she whispered against his throat. Just for tonight. I want to forget everything except this. Except us. The way we used to be. The storm raged outside, but in the cave, there was only warmth and wanting. They came together with the desperate hunger of the long-starved. Clothes discarded with trembling hands. Skin meeting skin in the firelight. It was nothing like the gentle loving they'd shared in youth. This was raw, needful, edged with the knowledge that dawn would bring reality crashing back. Caleb worshipped her with hands and mouth, relearning the geography of her body, finding new scars that made his heart ache. She responded with equal fervor, her quiet sounds of pleasure the sweetest music he'd ever heard. When they joined, it was with tears streaming down both their faces, grief for what was lost, joy for what was found, fear for what tomorrow might bring. After, they lay entwined on his bedroll, listening to the rain. Joanna traced patterns on his chest, avoiding the bandage. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. He pressed a kiss to her hair. But I won't run without you. Not again. I can't leave. Not yet. There are things, preparations to make. And Ethan will hunt me to the ends of the earth. Yes. She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. But he's not the tracker he thinks he is. And I know ways out of Dustwood he's never dreamed of. You'd come with me? Leave everything behind? What everything? She laughed, but it held no humor. A house that's not a home? A marriage that's not a partnership? A town that worships false prophets and punishes truth-tellers? It won't be easy. Life on the run will be life. She interrupted, which is more than I have now. They made plans as the storm began to fade. Where to meet, what to bring, how to disappear. Practical details that seemed surreal in the aftermath of passion. As dawn approached, Joanna dressed reluctantly. 3 days, she said. I'll need 3 days to gather money. Supplies. Can you stay hidden that long? I've stayed hidden for years. 3 days is nothing. She kissed him one last time, pouring promise into it. The old mine shaft at Devil's Canyon, midnight. I'll be there. And if you're not, then I'm dead. She said it matter-of-factly. Because that's the only thing that would stop me. She slipped from the cave as the first light touched the peaks. Caleb watched her go, his heart full of hope and dread in equal measure. 3 days. He could survive 3 days. As he banked the fire and prepared to move deeper into the mountains, he thought about the journal she'd left, Joseph's confession, written in his own hand. It could clear Caleb's name, but at what cost? The town would tear itself apart. People like Joanna, who'd suffered in silence, would be exposed to judgment and scandal. Maybe some truths were better buried. Maybe the only justice that mattered was the kind you carved out for yourself. One choice at a time. The sun rose full, burning off the storm's remnants. Somewhere below, Ethan Cross was waking to find his wife in their bed, never knowing she'd spent the night washing another man's blood from her hands and his touch from her skin. 3 days, then freedom, or damnation. Caleb couldn't tell which, and found he didn't much care. He'd tasted heaven in hell's heart. Whatever came next, it had to be better than the purgatory of life without her. The mountains kept their secrets, and Caleb Vane, outlaw and lover, disappeared into their embrace once more. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Dustwood's main street as Ethan Cross returned from another fruitless search. 3 days of scouring the mountains had yielded nothing but sore muscles and wounded pride. His deputies dismounted wearily, their faces etched with defeat. He's vanished like smoke, Deputy Tom Morrison muttered, leading his exhausted horse to the water trough. Man knows these hills better than the Apache. Ethan said nothing, his jaw tight as he strode toward his house. The town watched him pass with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. The sheriff, who couldn't catch his wife's former lover, the whispers followed him like vultures. Inside, he found Joanna at her sewing, the picture of domestic tranquility. She looked up as he entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Any luck?" she asked. "You know there wasn't." He hung his gun belt on its peg, studying her. "You'd know if we'd caught him." "I suppose I would." She returned to her needlework, but he noticed her hands weren't quite steady. Ethan poured himself a whiskey, downing it in one burning swallow. 3 days of questions gnawed at him. 3 days of wondering what secrets lay buried in his own home. "Judge Thornton arrives tomorrow," he said finally, "to oversee the inquest into Joseph's death." "I see. You'll need to testify about what Caleb said in the church, about before." Her needle paused. "What would you have me say?" "The truth." He poured another drink. "Whatever that is." "The truth." She set down her sewing, meeting his gaze. "The truth is that Joseph Harrow was a monster who hid behind God's word. The truth is that Caleb Vane was framed for a crime he didn't commit. The truth is—" "Enough!" Ethan's glass slammed down. "You think I don't know? You think I've been sheriff for 10 years without seeing the rot underneath?" The admission stunned them both. Joanna stared at her husband as if seeing a stranger. "Then why?" she whispered. "Why did you let it happen?" "Because this town needed order more than it needed truth. Because Joseph kept the peace, kept the miners from rioting, kept the farmers and ranchers from killing each other over water rights." He laughed bitterly. "You think I liked it? You think I enjoyed turning a blind eye? You had a choice." "Did I?" "A sheriff serves at the pleasure of the town council, and the town council served at the pleasure of Joseph Harrow." He moved to the window, staring out at the dusty street. "I told myself I was protecting the greater good, that one man's injustice was worth 100 men's safety." "And one woman's suffering?" The question hung between them like a blade. Ethan's shoulders sagged. "I didn't know, not at first, and when I suspected—" He turned to face her. "What would you have had me do arrest the minister, start a war that would tear this town apart? You could have protected me. I thought I was, by marrying you, giving you respectability, a safe home. A pretty cage is still a cage. Ethan." They stood in silence. Years of unspoken truths finally given voice. Outside, the normal sounds of town life continued. Horses, hammering from the blacksmith, children playing, life moving on, oblivious to the reckoning taking place behind closed doors. "You still love him?" Ethan said. It wasn't a question. "I never stopped." "And these past 3 days? Where have you really been when you claimed to be at the church auxiliary meetings?" Joanna lifted her chin. "Preparing." "For what?" Before she could answer, rapid footsteps thundered up the porch. Deputy Morrison burst through the door without knocking, his young face flushed with excitement. "Sheriff, we found something. That old lawyer, Garrett, he's got papers. Evidence about the Vane trial." Ethan's expression hardened. "What kind of evidence?" "Don't know exactly, but he's asking for you. Says he'll only talk to you and—" Morrison's eyes flicked to Joanna. "And Mrs. Cross." The ride to Ezra Garrett's office felt like a funeral procession. The old lawyer occupied a cramped space above the general store. His windows dusty and his shingle faded. Few people sought his services anymore. Joseph had seen to that. Spreading word that Garrett was a drunk and unreliable, they found him surrounded by papers. His roomy eyes sharp despite his 70 years. On his desk lay a familiar leather journal. Mrs. Cross, Sheriff. He nodded to each. "Thank you for coming." "Where did you get that?" Ethan demanded, recognizing Joseph's journal. "It was left under my door this morning." "Anonymous." Garrett's eyes stayed on Joanna. "Though I have my suspicions about the benefactor." "What's in it?" Joanna asked quietly. "The truth, names, dates, amounts paid." Joseph kept meticulous records of his corruption. Garrett opened the journal, pointing to specific entries. Here, $500 to Lucas Webb for false testimony, $200 to Marcus Stone for finding the stolen cattle on Vane land, and here, the most damning of all. He turned to a page near the middle. In Joseph's precise handwriting, the Vane property secured, water rights transferred to Mountain Mining Collective. My percentage ensures the church expansion and more. God provides for those who provide for themselves. As for the boy, let him rot, prison or a noose. It matters not. Ethan read the passage twice, his face growing paler with each word. Christ Almighty. There's more, Garrett continued. Names of town council members who profited, deputies who looked the other way. Half this town's leadership is implicated. Why show us this? Joanna asked. Because I'm old, Mrs. Cross, too old to fear what comes next. And because I sat in that courtroom 5 years ago and watched an innocent man get railroaded, and I did nothing. He closed the journal. This is my chance for redemption. Publishing this will destroy Dustwood. Ethan said heavily, Perhaps, or perhaps it will cleanse it. Garrett leaned back in his chair. The question is, Sheriff, what will you do? Will you bury this to preserve your ordered peace, or will you finally choose justice? Ethan stared at the journal as if it were a coiled rattlesnake. Joanna watched him, seeing the battle play out on his face, the lawman versus the pragmatist, the husband versus the sheriff. There's something else, Garrett said. A witness has come forward, someone willing to testify about Joseph's other crimes, the ones involving women. Who? Ethan's voice was hoarse. Mary Patterson, Sarah Mills, Rebecca Young. Garrett's voice was gentle. And they say there are others, women who've been carrying this shame in silence. Joanna closed her eyes. She knew those names. Young women, vulnerable women, women without protection. Like she had been. If this comes out, Ethan began, it needs to come out. Joanna interrupted. No more secrets, no more lies, no more women suffering in silence because the truth is inconvenient. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time in their marriage, she saw real respect in his eyes. You know what this means. Your name will be connected to it. The scandal. I'm already ruined in the eyes of the town. What's one more scandal? In vain, if he's cleared. Then an innocent man goes free. She said simply. The weight of the moment pressed down on them all. Outside, a dog barked. The normal world continued, unaware that its foundations were about to shift. I need time, Ethan said finally. To think, to prepare. Time is what we don't have, Garrett warned. Judge Thornton arrives tomorrow. If we're going to act, it needs to be now. Ethan took the journal with hands that seemed suddenly old. I'll need to speak with the witnesses, verify the evidence, and then... He straightened, and Joanna saw the sheriff he could have been, should have been, all along. Then we'll let the truth fall where it may. They left Garrett's office as the sun began to sink. The ride back was silent, each lost in thought. As they reached the sheriff's house, Ethan finally spoke. You're planning to leave with him? Yes. When? Soon. He dismounted, helping her down out of habit more than courtesy. I won't stop you. Why? Because I've caged you long enough. Because I've been a coward hiding behind a badge. He touched her face gently, perhaps the first truly tender gesture of their marriage. And because you deserve to be with someone who sees you as more than a possession or a duty. Ethan, go, he said quietly. When the time comes, just go. I'll handle what comes after. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, surprising them both. You're a better man than you know. Ethan Cross. No, but maybe I can start being the man I should have been. They parted in the hallway, he to his study with the damning journal, she to their bedroom to complete her preparations. Through her window, she could see the mountains turning purple in the twilight. Somewhere up there, Caleb waited. Tomorrow, Judge Thornton would arrive. The truth would finally have its day, and in the chaos that followed, two lovers would disappear into the vast wilderness, leaving behind the ashes of a town built on lies. Joanna packed carefully, taking only what they would need. Money sewn into her corset, medicine and provisions hidden in saddlebags, a change of clothes that could withstand hard travel. As midnight approached, she left a note on her pillow, not for Ethan, who already knew, but for whoever might wonder in years to come. It said simply, I chose love over fear. I chose truth over comfort. I chose to live. The streets were empty as she slipped from the sheriff's house for the last time. Behind her, Ethan sat at his desk, writing out warrants by lamplight, for town councilmen, for false witnesses, for all who had profited from Joseph's corruption. Come morning, Dustwood would wake to a new world, but Joanna would be gone, riding toward a different dawn with the only man who had ever owned her heart. The respectability she left behind felt like nothing compared to the freedom that awaited. In the distance, a coyote howled. She smiled and quickened her pace. It was time to stop being the sheriff's wife. It was time to be herself. The old barn stood like a skeleton against the night sky, its weathered boards silver in the moonlight. Caleb waited in the shadows, every nerve on edge. He'd arrived early, unable to stay away despite the risk. The journal he'd retrieved from his saddlebags weighed heavy in his hands. Joseph's words of confession, Joanna's key to freedom, now his to carry. Hoofbeats approached, soft and careful. His hand moved to his gun, then relaxed as he recognized the rider's silhouette. Joanna dismounted gracefully, leading her horse into the barn's shelter. When she turned to him, her face was luminous with determination. You came, he breathed. Did you doubt I would? Every minute of every hour. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. I kept thinking I dreamed it all, that morning in the cave, your promises. No dreams. She pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. Though what comes next might be a nightmare. Ethan knows everything. He has the journal. Caleb tensed. You gave it to him. To the lawyer, Garrett. He'll see it reaches the right hands. She told him quickly about the afternoon's revelations, the witnesses coming forward, Ethan's unexpected capitulation. By tomorrow, Dustwood will be in chaos, and we'll be gone. Yes. She moved to her saddlebags, checking supplies with efficient movements. I brought everything we discussed. Food for a week, medicine, ammunition, money enough to start over, if we're careful. Joe, he caught her hands, stilling their nervous movement. Are you certain? Once we leave, there's no going back. I know. Her eyes met his, fierce and unafraid. I've been dead for 5 years. Caleb, whatever hardships await us, at least I'll face them feeling alive. They worked together to prepare the horses, movements synchronized by old familiarity. As Joanna adjusted her saddle, she spoke quietly. There's something else. The women who came forward, Mary, Sarah, Rebecca, they weren't the only ones Joseph hurt. How many? Too many? Some married now, trying to forget, others who left town in shame. Her voice hardened. He baptized their children while carrying the secret of what he'd done to their mothers. The whole town worshipped a devil in priest's clothing. They'll know better now. Will they? Or will they find another false prophet to follow? She swung into her saddle with practiced ease. People need their illusions. Caleb, it's easier than facing the truth about themselves. They rode out together, taking the old cattle trail that wound toward the northern passes. The night was clear. Stars scattered like spilled silver across the sky. They kept to a steady pace, not racing but not doddering either. Every mile between them and Dustwood felt like a chain breaking. Where will we go? Joanna asked as they paused to rest the horses near a small spring. West, at first. Maybe California eventually. I hear there's work in the gold fields for those willing to sweat. He studied her in the moonlight. It won't be easy. No fine house, no servants, no respectability. I've had respectability. It tastes like ashes. She moved closer to him. I'd rather have honest dirt under my nails than clean hands that hide blood. They rode on through the night, stopping only when the horses needed rest. As dawn approached, they reached the abandoned mining camp Caleb had scouted days before. The buildings were mostly collapsed, but one cabin remained solid enough for shelter. We'll rest here through the day, he decided. Travel by night until we're well clear of the county. Inside the cabin, they found evidence of other travelers. A circle of old ashes in the fireplace, empty tins in the corner. Joanna spread their bedrolls while Caleb tended the horses. When he returned, he found her standing at the broken window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Regrets already? He asked softly. No regrets, just... She leaned back against him. I'm thinking about the life I'm leaving. Not mourning it, just acknowledging it. The woman who was Sheriff Cross's wife, she's dead now. I need to bury her properly before I can be free. He understood. They all had ghosts to lay to rest. His own had haunted him through 5 years of running, the young man who'd believed in justice, who'd trusted the law to protect the innocent. That man had died in a courtroom, listening to lies pile up like stones on a grave. Who will you be now? He asked. Myself, whatever that means. She turned in his arms. We could change our names, become entirely new people. We could, but I'm tired of running from who I am. He touched the scar on his side, Joseph's last gift. Caleb Vane, outlaw and killer. That's who I am now. Can you live with that? You're also the man who loved me when I had nothing to offer but dreams. The man who came back despite the danger. The man who chose truth over safety. She kissed him softly. I can live with all of you. Caleb, the question is, can you live with who I've become? And who is that? A woman who survived by learning when to bend and when to break. Who kept terrible secrets to protect others. Who isn't innocent anymore. If I ever was. Her voice dropped. I've done things I'm not proud of. Compromises that seemed necessary at the time. We've both got blood on our hands. Joe, maybe that's what makes us right for each other now. He pulled her down to the bedrolls. The innocent kids we were are gone, but maybe what's left is stronger. They made love in the morning light, slower this time than in the cave. Without the desperate urgency of that night, they could savor each touch, each whispered endearment. Their bodies remembered the old rhythms while discovering new ones. When passion finally spent itself, they lay entwined, listening to the desert wake around them. "Tell me about the years between," Joanna said. "Where did you go? What did you see?" So he told her about the first terrifying months as a fugitive, the odd jobs taken under false names, the loneliness that ate at him like acid. He spoke of the Mexican border towns where no one asked questions, of the winter he nearly died from fever in a line shack, of the times he'd almost come back despite the danger. "I wrote you letters," he admitted. "Hundreds of them. Never sent, burned them all eventually. What could I say? That I loved you? That I was sorry? Words seemed too small for what I'd lost. I used to dream you'd come back," she confided. "For the first year, every rider on the horizon might be you, every knock at the door. Then I realized waiting was killing me slowly. So I tried to forget, built walls around those memories. I'm sorry I took so long. Don't be. If you'd come back sooner, I might not have been ready." She traced patterns on his chest. "I needed these years to understand the difference between love and ownership. Ethan never loved me. He loved the idea of me, the perfect wife to complete his perfect life. Joseph wanted to possess me, body and soul. But you just wanted me to be happy, even if it meant letting me go. I still want that, if you change your mind." She silenced him with a kiss. "The only thing I want to change is the past, and that's the one thing we can't do. So we move forward instead." They slept through the heat of the day, taking turns keeping watch. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Caleb woke to find Joanna reading through the provisions, making lists. "Planning our future?" he asked. "Someone has to—" "You're good at many things." Caleb vain, but practical planning isn't one of them. She showed him her calculations. "We have enough money for 2 months, maybe 3 if we're careful. We'll need work quickly, and a story for who we are. Brother and sister, cousins, husband and wife," she said firmly. "I'm done pretending to be anything other than what I am. Your woman, if you'll have me. Always," he promised, echoing that long-ago vow. This time, he meant to keep it. As twilight fell, they prepared to ride again. Joanna had changed into the practical clothes she'd packed, split skirts for riding, a man's shirt that fit her better than her fancy dresses ever had. With her hair braided and a hat shading her face, she looked like a different woman, stronger, freer. "Ready?" Caleb asked, handing her the reins. "For anything," she replied. They rode out into the gathering darkness, 2 figures against the vast landscape. Behind them, Dustwood would be waking to truth and chaos. Ahead lay uncertainty, hardship, the challenges of a life outside the law. But they rode together, and that made all the difference. In the old barn where they'd met, Joanna had left Ethan's ring on a beam, the last symbol of a life she no longer wanted. On her hand now was a simple band Caleb had fashioned from silver wire, a promise without papers or ceremonies. No church blessing, he'd warned as he slipped it on her finger. No legal standing, nothing but my word. Your word is worth more than all the legal documents in the world, she'd replied. I've seen what official marriages can become. I'd rather have honest love than sanctified ownership. Now, as they navigated the treacherous mountain paths by moonlight, that wire ring caught the light. A simple thing, but it represented everything. Choice, freedom, a love that had survived betrayal and separation and the weight of years. They would need new names eventually, a new story for curious strangers. But for now, in the darkness between their old lives and their new one, they were simply Caleb and Joanna, 2 souls who had found their way back to each other against all odds. The mountains embraced them, offering 1,000 hidden paths to tomorrow. They chose one and rode on, leaving the past to bury itself in Dustwood's dust. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And that, Joanna thought as she watched Caleb's silhouette against the stars, was the only truth that mattered. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of sand and scorched earth beneath a merciless sun. They'd been riding for 6 days now, pushing hard through the badlands where few dared to follow. The horses were beginning to show the strain, and their water was running dangerously low. There, Caleb pointed to a shimmer on the horizon. Rock formation ahead, might be shade, maybe even a spring. Joanna squinted through the heat haze. Her lips cracked despite the careful rationing. The refined sheriff's wife of a week ago would have been horrified by her appearance now, skin burnt brown, clothes stiff with dust and sweat, hair tangled beneath her hat. But she'd never felt more herself. They reached the rocks as the sun peaked, finding blessed shade beneath an overhang. No spring. But Caleb located a depression where recent rains had collected. The water was brackish, but drinkable. They let the horses drink first, then refilled their canteens. "We're being followed," Joanna said quietly, as she watched their back trail. "I know. Spotted the dust cloud this morning." Caleb checked his rifle, counting ammunition. 3 riders, maybe 4, moving fast. Bounty hunters? Most likely. Word travels fast out here. He studied the terrain with experienced eyes. "We could make a stand here. Good position. Clear sight lines." "No." She touched his arm. "No more killing unless we have no choice. We've spilled enough blood." He wanted to argue. These men were hunting them for money. Would show no mercy if they caught up. But something in her eyes stopped him. The violence had to end somewhere, or they'd never be free of it. "Then we ride," he decided. "There's a trading post 2 days north, if we can reach it." They didn't waste time discussing alternatives. Within minutes, they were mounted again, pushing into the worst of the afternoon heat. The horses protested but obeyed, trained to trust their riders even when every instinct screamed for rest. By nightfall, the dust cloud was closer. They made a cold camp in a dry wash, not daring a fire that would pinpoint their position. Joanna leaned against Caleb in the darkness, sharing body heat as the desert temperature plummeted. "Tell me about California," she whispered. "Paint me a picture of where we're going." So he did, spinning dreams from fragments of truth and hearsay, gold camps where a man's past mattered less than his willingness to work. Towns being born daily, needing carpenters and seamstresses, shopkeepers and teachers, a place where they could build something new from the ashes of their old lives. "We could have a little house," he murmured against her hair. "Nothing fancy, just 4 walls that belong to us. A garden where you could grow flowers. I'd rather grow vegetables, practical things." She shifted closer. "Maybe children someday. Would you want that? With you, I'd want everything." He tightened his embrace. "But bringing children into this life, always looking over our shoulders. Then we make a different life, one where we don't have to look back." Dawn came too soon, and with it the knowledge that their pursuers had gained ground. Through Caleb's field glasses, they could make out 4 riders, still distant but closing steadily. "Their horses are fresher," Joanna observed. "We can't outrun them. Then we get clever." Caleb studied the landscape. "There's a box canyon about 5 miles west. One way in, but there's an old smuggler's trail over the back ridge. Risky, but passable if we're careful." They changed direction, letting their tracks lead obvious toward the canyon. The pursuers would follow, expecting to trap them in a dead end. By the time they realized their mistake, Caleb and Joanna would be miles away. The plan almost worked. They'd just reached the hidden trail when a shot rang out. Joanna's horse screamed, stumbling as blood bloomed on its flank. She kicked free of the stirrups as it went down, rolling clear with practiced grace. Caleb wheeled back, pulling her up behind him as more shots split the air. "Go!" she shouted. His horse, carrying double now, labored up the steep trail, rocks scattered beneath its hooves, and twice they nearly went over the edge. Behind them, shouts indicated their pursuers had found the canyon's back entrance. They crested the ridge as the first rider appeared below. Caleb didn't hesitate. He sent his horse plunging down the far side, trusting luck and skill to keep them upright. Joanna pressed against his back, her arms tight around his waist, her breath warm on his neck. They hit the desert floor running, but their mount was exhausted, stumbling with every stride. When they spotted the ruins of an old way station ahead, Caleb made the decision. "We make our stand there." The station had been abandoned for years, its adobe walls crumbling but still solid enough for cover. They dismounted, Caleb sending the horse away with a slap to its rump. It might find water. Survive. They'd face what came on foot. Inside the ruins. They took inventory. 2 rifles, 3 pistols between them. Maybe 40 rounds total. 4 canteens of water. Food for 2 days if they stretched it. Could be worse, Joanna said with dark humor. Could be better. Caleb positioned himself at a window gap. But I've got you watching my back. That evens the odds considerably. She smiled, checking her rifle with movements he'd taught her years ago. Remember when you showed me how to shoot? I was terrified of the recoil. You learned fast. Natural eye for it. He risked a quick kiss. Whatever happens, save it for after. She interrupted. We're both walking away from this. The riders appeared on the horizon, spreading out as they approached. Smart. They'd make harder targets that way. Caleb recognized the lead rider, Bill Trask, a bounty hunter with a reputation for bringing men in dead rather than alive. Vane, Trask's voice carried across the desert. You and the woman come out peaceable-like. No need for bloodshed. Funny talk from a man who shoots first and asks questions of corpses. Caleb called back. That's business. Nothing personal. You're worth 500 alive, 300 dead. I'd prefer alive. Less trouble transporting. And Mrs. Cross? The ladies wanted for questioning back in Dustwood. No bounty, but I figure the sheriff might be grateful to get his wife back. Grateful enough to pay. Joanna laughed, surprising everyone. You're behind the times. Mr. Trask. Ethan Cross has bigger problems than a runaway wife. Last I heard, he was arresting half the town council for corruption. Silence greeted this news. Then Trask spoke again, uncertainty creeping into his voice. That's no concern of mine. I've got paper on Vane, and that's enough. Then come and collect, Caleb challenged. The attack came at sunset, timed so the defenders would be staring into the glare. But Caleb had anticipated this, positioning them to minimize the disadvantage. When the first rider charged, Joanna's shot took him from his saddle. The others pulled back, reassessing. Nice shooting, Caleb murmured. I had a good teacher. Night fell with the attackers probing for weaknesses. Twice they tried to rush the ruins. Twice they were driven back. But ammunition was running low, and everyone knew it. They'll wait us out, Joanna said during a lull. Thirst will do their work for them. Maybe, or maybe they'll get impatient. Caleb had been studying the ruins, forming a desperate plan. There's an old well in the courtyard, probably dry, but the shaft goes deep. If we could reach the bottom, underground river. She finished. The old-timers always said there was water flowing beneath this whole region. It was a slim chance, but better than dying of thirst or bullets. They waited until the moon set, then made their move. The well shaft was narrow, its depths lost in blackness. Caleb went first, rope tied around his waist, Joanna anchoring him from above. 50 feet down, his boots hit water. He tugged the rope, their signal, and she followed, climbing down into darkness. The water was knee-deep and moving, an underground stream flowing through a natural tunnel. Which direction to go was guesswork, but staying meant certain death. They waded into the flow, hands linked in the absolute darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes opening into larger chambers, sometimes narrowing until they had to squeeze through. Time lost meaning in that underground world. Then, blessedly, they saw light. The stream emerged from a hillside 2 miles from the way station. They crawled out, gasping, soaked and shivering in the pre-dawn air. In the distance, they could see torchlights around the ruins, Trask and his men still maintaining their siege on an empty building. We need to move, Caleb said. They'll figure it out soon enough. But Joanna was laughing, really laughing for the first time in years. We did it. We actually did it. He caught her joy, pulling her close despite their sodden clothes. We make a good team. Mrs. Vane. The best. She agreed. They walked through the morning, their wet clothes drying in the rising heat. By noon, they'd reached the trading post, a ramshackle collection of buildings around a precious well. The owner, A grizzled Mexican named Eduardo asked no questions when they traded Joanna's hidden jewelry for supplies, fresh horses, and silence. As they prepared to leave, Eduardo pulled Caleb aside. "The woman, she's got the look of one who's chosen her path. Not many would follow a man into the desert." "She's not following," Caleb corrected. "We're walking together." Eduardo smiled. "Even rarer. Then, guard that well. Amigo. Such treasures are not easily found twice." They rode out as evening approached, heading west toward possibilities and dreams. Behind them, their various pasts grew smaller with each mile. The sheriff's wife and the outlaw, the victim and the killer, all the roles they'd been forced to play. "No more running after California," Joanna said as they made camp that night. "Whatever we face there, we face it standing still." "Agreed. I'm tired of looking back." He pulled her close. From now on, only forward. They sealed the promise with a kiss, there under the vast desert sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new names, new lives to build. But tonight they were simply two people who'd chosen love over fear, freedom over safety, truth over comfortable lies. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. But Joanna found comfort in their distance. Under such a sky, all problems seemed temporary. Only love endured. The love that had survived separation, injustice, violence, and years of silence. They'd paid for their freedom in blood and tears. Now it was time to discover what that freedom could build. San Lucero lay nestled in a valley where two rivers met, a border town that belonged to neither Mexico nor America, but to whoever could survive its harsh embrace. After 3 weeks of hard travel, Caleb and Joanna arrived with dust in their lungs and hope worn thin as their clothes. Not much to look at, Caleb admitted as they surveyed the collection of adobe buildings and wooden shacks that comprised the town. "It's perfect," Joanna countered. "Small enough that strangers are common, large enough to disappear in." They rented a room above the general store from a widow named Rosa Medina, who asked no questions beyond whether they could pay a week in advance. The room was sparse, a bed, 2 chairs, a wash basin, but it had a window overlooking the main street and a door they could bar from inside. Mr. and Mrs. Wade. Joanna introduced them, having chosen the name for its commonness. "My husband's a carpenter. I take in sewing." Rosa nodded, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Not the way they moved like people ready to run. Not the weapons they thought they'd concealed. Not the pale band of skin on Joanna's finger where a different ring had recently rested. "Work you'll find plenty of," Rosa said simply. "Town's growing. Questions, though, those we don't much care for in San Lucero." It was as clear a welcome as they could hope for. Caleb found work quickly at the livery stable, his knowledge of horses making him valuable despite his assumed name. The owner, a German named Schmidt, cared only that Caleb could gentle the wild mustangs Mexican traders brought in. Joanna set up as a seamstress, her educated hands surprising those who expected frontier crudeness. For 3 months, they built a quiet life. Mornings began with coffee shared in their small room. Evenings ended with them reading by lamplight, books borrowed from the surprising collection the saloon keeper maintained. They made no close friends but earned respect through honest work and fair dealing. "I could almost forget," Joanna said one evening, mending a tear in Caleb's shirt. "Sometimes a whole day passes without looking over my shoulder." "That's dangerous thinking," he warned gently. "The past has long arms." But even he had begun to relax, to believe they might have found a place to rest. They should have known better. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday, riding a horse too fine for a drifter and wearing clothes that whispered of money despite the trail dust. He took a room at the hotel and spent his days watching, asking casual questions that weren't casual at all. "He's looking for someone," Schmidt told Caleb. "Been asking about newcomers to town, couples, specifically." That night, Caleb and Joanna packed their essentials, ready to run at the first sign of trouble. But something held them back, pride, perhaps, or simple exhaustion at the thought of starting over yet again. The confrontation came 3 days later. Joanna was alone in their room, working on a dress for the banker's wife, when footsteps climbed the stairs. She reached for the derringer in her sewing basket, then froze as a familiar voice called through the door. "Joanna, I know you're in there. It's Marcus." Marcus Stone. Her blood chilled. Marcus Stone, one of the men who'd testified against Caleb, who'd sworn to finding stolen cattle on Vain land. Joseph's creature, bought and paid for. "I'm alone," Marcus continued. "Just want to talk. About Dustwood. About what's happened since you left." Against her better judgment, she opened the door, keeping the derringer hidden but ready. Marcus looked older, worn down by something more than travel. His hands shook as he removed his hat. "May I come in? Caleb will be back soon. I'm counting on it. Need to talk to both of you." He glanced nervously down the hallway. "Please, I'm not here to cause trouble. Opposite. In fact..." She let him in but kept her distance, positioning herself near the window. Marcus sat heavily in one of their chairs, seeming to collapse in on himself. "Joseph's dead," he began. "We know. Caleb shot him." "No, I mean, what came after? The journal, the trials, the whole town tearing itself apart." He rubbed his face. "I testified, told the truth this time, about the money Joseph paid me, about the lies I told. Judge gave me a choice, prison or exile. I chose exile. And you tracked us here to what? Ask forgiveness? To warn you." He met her eyes. "There are others looking, not bounty hunters. Worse, Joseph had partners, silent investors in his schemes. They lost everything when the truth came out. They blame Caleb for starting it all, you for helping him." Before Joanna could respond, footsteps thundered on the stairs. Caleb burst through the door, gun drawn, relaxing only slightly when he saw Marcus. "Stone," he said coldly, "give me one reason not to throw you out that window." "Because I'm trying to make things right." Marcus replied, "Because I owe you 5 years of your life and can never repay it. Because 3 men are coming to kill you both, and I rode ahead to warn you." Caleb and Joanna exchanged glances. "Who?" Caleb demanded. "Luther Briggs, Samuel Hatch, and a gunman named Cortez. They were Joseph's silent partners in the mining scheme. When everything collapsed, they lost thousands. They've been hunting you since word spread about where you'd gone." "How did they find us?" "Same way I did, following rumors, tracking the kind of work you'd likely find, a carpenter and seamstress, newly arrived, keeping to themselves." Marcus shrugged. "It's a trail for those determined to follow it." Caleb holstered his gun, thinking fast. "When?" "Tomorrow, maybe the day after. They were a day behind me last I knew." "Then we run tonight," Joanna decided. "No." Caleb's voice was firm. "I'm done running, done looking over my shoulder. If they want to fight, they'll get one." "Caleb." "He's right," Marcus interrupted. "You run now, they'll just keep following. Men like Briggs don't give up when money's involved." He stood, seeming to find some resolve. "I'll stand with you. It's the least I can do." Caleb laughed bitterly. "You? You couldn't stand up to Joseph when it mattered. What makes you think you can stand up to killers?" "Because I've got nothing left to lose. My reputation's gone. My money's gone. My home's gone. All I've got is a chance to balance the scales a bit." He met Caleb's eyes. "I helped destroy your life? Let me help save it." The room fell silent. Outside, the normal sounds of San Lucero continued. Horses, hammering, a woman calling her children to supper, life moving on, unaware of the storm approaching. "We need more guns," Joanna said practically. "And people we can trust. Schmidt's good in a fight," Caleb offered. "Fought in the Mexican War, and there's Diego at the saloon. He's got no love for outsiders causing trouble in his town." They spent the night preparing. Marcus provided details. Briggs favored his left side in a fight. Hatch was half blind in his right eye. Cortez was fast but impatient. Joanna cleaned and loaded weapons while Caleb recruited allies, finding more support than expected. San Lucero might not ask questions, but it protected its own. Dawn came blood red, painting the dusty streets in ominous hues. Caleb positioned their defenders carefully. Schmidt in the livery with a rifle. Diego on the saloon roof. Two miners who owed Caleb favors watching the back streets. Marcus waited in the general store, sweating but determined. Joanna stood with Caleb in front of their boarding house. She'd traded her dress for pants and a man's shirt, her hair pinned up under a hat. The colt at her hip had been a gift from Caleb, perfectly balanced for her smaller hands. You could wait inside, he offered one last time. We stand together or not at all. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not since breakfast. You're slipping. The riders appeared at the far end of Main Street, three shadows against the morning sun. They came slowly, confidently, spreading out as they approached. Luther Briggs rode in the center, a big man with cruel eyes and a Bible in his vest pocket. Joseph's spiritual air and greed if not position. Caleb Vane, Briggs called out. You've led us quite a chase. Should have saved yourself the trouble, Caleb replied. Nothing here for you but graves. Bold talk for a man who hides behind a woman's skirts. I hide behind no one, Joanna said clearly. Though you seem to hide behind hired guns. At least Joseph did his own dirty work. Briggs's face darkened. Joseph was a great man brought low by liars and thieves. We're here to settle his accounts. Joseph was a parasite who finally got what he deserved. Caleb countered. Same as you will if you don't turn around now. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Somewhere a dog barked. A tumbleweed rolled across the street in defiance of all dramatic convention. Then Cortez went for his gun. The street exploded in gunfire. Cortez was fast, but Schmidt's rifle from the livery was faster, catching him before he cleared leather. Hatch dove for cover as Diego's shots from the saloon roof peppered the ground around him. Briggs, proving smarter than expected, rolled from his saddle, using his horse as a shield. Caleb pushed Joanna behind a water trough as bullets split the air where they'd stood. She came up firing, her shots disciplined and accurate, forcing Hatch to keep his head down. Caleb moved laterally, trying for a clear angle on Briggs. The fight might have lasted seconds or hours. Time dissolved in the chaos of powder smoke and flying lead. Marcus emerged from the store, firing wildly but effectively, his shots more enthusiasm than accuracy. One caught Hatch in the shoulder, spinning him around just as Joanna's next bullet found its mark. That left Briggs, crouched behind his dying horse, cursing steadily. You think this ends it? He shouted. You think killing us wipes the slate clean? There'll be others. There always are. Then we'll face them too, Caleb replied. However many it takes. Briggs made his move, rising with surprising speed for a big man. Gun swinging toward Joanna. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Caleb's, Joanna's, and Marcus's. Briggs staggered, looking surprised, then fell forward into the dust. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the town began to breathe again. Doors opened, faces peered out. Schmidt climbed down from the livery. Diego descended from his perch. They gathered in the street, looking at the 3 dead men with expressions ranging from satisfaction to sorrow. It's done, Marcus said quietly. He looked older, worn, but somehow cleaner. My debt's paid as much as it can be. Where will you go? Joanna asked. South. I think Mexico. Somewhere the name Stone doesn't mean anything. He offered his hand to Caleb, who, after a moment's hesitation, took it. I'm sorry for everything. It doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. He left that afternoon, riding toward whatever redemption he might find. The bodies were buried in the cemetery outside town, markers bearing only names and dates. No one spoke words over them. That evening, as Caleb and Joanna sat on their small balcony watching the sunset, Rosa Medina climbed the stairs with surprising agility for her age. You planning to stay? She asked bluntly. Caleb and Joanna looked at each other, a whole conversation in that glance. For now, Joanna answered. If we're still welcome, welcome's earned, not given. You earned it today. Rosa studied them with those sharp eyes. Town needs a sheriff. Last one died of drink 6 months back. Job's yours if you want it. Mr. Wade, or whatever your real name is." She left them to consider, her footsteps fading down the stairs. The offer hung in the air like a challenge, a chance to stop running and build something real. Sheriff Caleb Vane, Joanna mused, has a certain irony to it. Everything about our lives has irony. He pulled her close. "What do you think? Could you be a sheriff's wife again?" "I was never really a sheriff's wife before, just playing a role." She turned to face him. "But being your wife, building a real life here, that I could do." They sealed the decision with a kiss as the stars emerged overhead. Tomorrow they'd face whatever came next. More trouble, perhaps, or maybe just the ordinary challenges of life in a border town. But they'd face it together, with their feet planted and their hearts sure. The running was over. The building had begun. The morning of Judge Thornton's arrival in Dustwood dawned clear and cold. Word had already spread through 3 territories about what awaited him. A town torn apart by truth. A minister dead. A sheriff who'd arrested half his own town council. The judge rode in with 6 federal marshals, prepared for anything except what he found. Order. Ethan Cross stood on the courthouse steps, badge still pinned to his vest, waiting. The arrests had been made, the evidence catalogued, the witnesses ready. He'd done his job with the same methodical precision he'd always shown, only this time he'd chosen justice over politics. "Sheriff Cross." Judge Thornton dismounted, studying the man before him. "I expected to find chaos. You'll find the truth instead." Ethan replied, "Ugly as it is." The trials began immediately, one by one. The conspirators faced judgment. Town councilmen who'd profited from Joseph's schemes, witnesses who'd perjured themselves for silver, deputies who'd looked the other way. The courtroom overflowed as citizen after citizen came forward, finally free to speak truths they'd buried for years. Mary Patterson testified first, her voice steady as she detailed Joseph's abuse. Sarah Mills followed, then Rebecca Young, then a dozen more. Women who'd carried shame in silence found strength in numbers. Their husbands, brothers, and fathers sat in stunned silence, forced to confront their failure to protect. When Marcus Stone's written confession was read, delivered before his flight south, the last doubts crumbled. The evidence was overwhelming. Joseph Harrow had been a predator cloaked in righteousness, and half the town had enabled him for profit or cowardice. "What of Caleb Vane?" Judge Thornton asked when the litany of corruption finally ended. "He killed a man in front of witnesses. He killed a monster." Ethan said simply, "One the law failed to stop. I won't hunt him for that. And your wife made her choice. I won't hunt her either." The judge studied him carefully. "You've changed. Sheriff, maybe, or maybe I finally became who I should have been all along." Ethan removed his badge, setting it on the judge's desk. "I'm done here. Dustwood needs a new sheriff, one who didn't help build this mess." He left that afternoon, riding east toward whatever redemption awaited a man who'd chosen order over justice for too long. Some said he became a rancher in Colorado. Others heard he joined the Rangers in Texas. The truth, like many truths in the West, disappeared into legend. Meanwhile, 500 miles away in San Lucero, Caleb Vane stood in a small chapel, sweating in his only good suit. The church was nothing like Dustwood's grand building, just adobe walls and rough benches, but it felt cleaner somehow. "Nervous?" Diego asked, standing as his best man. "Terrified," Caleb admitted. "Getting married proper this time, legal and everything. You've been married in every way that matters for months now." That's what Joanna says, but she deserves the ceremony, the recognition. He adjusted his string tie for the 10th time. No more hiding what we are to each other. The door opened, and Rosa Medina's grandson began playing a battered guitar. The melody was simple but sweet, filling the small space with hope. Then Joanna appeared, and Caleb forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, wildflowers from the desert woven into her hair. No fancy veil or train. No gathering of society matrons to judge and whisper. Just a woman walking toward the man she loved, her face radiant with joy. Father Miguel, the traveling priest who visited San Lucero monthly, performed the ceremony in a mixture of Spanish and English. The words mattered less than the promises behind them. To love, to honor, to face whatever came together. When Father Miguel asked if anyone objected, the chapel door creaked open. Every head turned, Caleb's hand moving instinctively toward where his gun would normally rest. But it was only Marcus Stone, dusty from hard riding, carrying a telegram. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but this couldn't wait." Caleb took the telegram with trembling hands. From Dustwood, sent by Judge Thornton himself. Records examined. Original conviction overturned. Caleb Vane fully pardoned all charges. Joseph Harrow posthumously convicted fraud and conspiracy. Justice delayed but not denied. You are free men, both of you. The chapel erupted in celebration. Caleb stood stunned, the papers shaking in his hands. Free, after 6 years, truly free, no more running, no more false names, no more looking over their shoulders. "Does this change anything?" Father Miguel asked gently. Caleb looked at Joanna, who was crying and laughing simultaneously. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know. It changes nothing about us," Joanna said firmly. "But everything about our future. We can use our real names. We can go anywhere, be anything." "Then let's finish what we started." Caleb decided. "Father, please continue." The ceremony concluded with cheers and tears. Marcus stayed for the celebration, sharing news from Dustwood, the town rebuilding under new leadership, the church converted into a school, the women Joseph had hurt forming a society to protect others. "Why come all this way to tell us?" Joanna asked as the party wound down. Partly guilt, partly hope. Marcus looked older but clearer, like a man who'd finally set down a heavy burden. "Figured you deserved to hear it from someone who helped cause the harm, and maybe I needed to see something good come from all that pain." He left the next morning, heading for his new life in Mexico. Caleb and Joanna watched him go from their balcony, arms wrapped around each other. "We could go back," Joanna mused. "To Dustwood. You could claim your family's land." "Could," Caleb pulled her closer. "But that land's soaked in bad memories. Here we've built something clean. Sheriff of San Lucero's not a bad life. And I've got more sewing work than I can handle. Plus, Rosa wants me to help start a school." She smiled. "Funny how we ran so far just to find another home." "Home's not a place," Caleb said. "It's who you're with." They stood together as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, San Lucero went about its evening routines, shopkeepers closing up, saloon music starting, families gathering for supper. Their town now, their people, their life. That night, in their small room above the general store, they made love with a freedom they'd never known before. No secrets, no shame, no fear of tomorrow. Just two people who'd fought through hell to find heaven in each other's arms. Later, as Joanna slept against his chest, Caleb thought about the strange path that had brought them here. The boy who'd believed in justice had died in a courtroom. The man who'd sought revenge had died in a church. What remained was something harder but truer. A survivor who'd learned that sometimes you had to break the law to serve justice. That love could endure anything. That redemption came not from forgetting the past, but from choosing a better future. Through the window, stars wheeled overhead. The same stars that had witnessed their flight across the desert. But now they were anchors instead of guides, fixed points in a life no longer adrift. In Dustwood, they were already becoming legend. The sheriff's wife who chose the outlaw. The wronged man who brought down a corrupt system. The love that survived everything the frontier could throw at it. Stories grew in the telling. Truth mixing with fiction until no one could separate them. But in San Lucero, they were simply Caleb and Joanna Vane, sheriff and teacher, husband and wife, two people building a life one day at a time. They'd have children eventually, Strong sons and daughters who'd grow up knowing their parents' story but not bound by it. They'd face other challenges, drought and floods, bandits and bureaucrats, all the trials of frontier life. But they'd face them standing firm, no longer running. The candle burned low, casting dancing shadows on the adobe walls. Caleb kissed Joanna's forehead, settled deeper into their bed, and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring its own concerns. Tonight, they were home. In the morning, he'd pin on his sheriff's badge and walk the streets of San Lucero, keeping peace in a town that had given them shelter. She'd open her shop and teach young girls to sew, to read, to stand tall in a world that tried to make them small. They'd build something lasting in this border town where questions weren't asked, and second chances bloomed like desert flowers after rain. The outlaw and the sheriff's wife had vanished into legend. In their place stood two people who'd learned that justice and law weren't always the same thing, that love could survive betrayal and separation, that sometimes you had to destroy the life you had to build the life you wanted. The stars kept their vigil as San Lucero slept, and in a small room above the general store, two hearts beat as one, finally and forever free. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. If you enjoyed this story of love, justice, and redemption, please let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. We'd love to connect with fellow Western story enthusiasts from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier tales, and share your thoughts about Caleb and Joanna's journey. What part of their story touched you the most? We'd love to hear your perspective.